Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Annapolis, where we recognize and celebrate the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. Knowing the earth is our home and all its creatures are kin, we strive to live with compassion, love, equity, and mutuality. In this spirit, we invite you to enter this space and time, bringing your full selves and all your lived experiences with you. If you are here for the first or second time, or are back after a long time, please identify yourself in the chat so we can welcome you more fully. And now, let us covenant together. Love is the spirit of our people, and service is its call. To build the beloved community, to seek fuller truth in love, to dwell together in peace, to offer aid and affirmation, and to live for one another. This is our covenant. Growth and change are an integral part of life itself. We light our chalice this morning both to celebrate them and to contemplate some of the many ways that we, as loving humans, can adapt to them.
Hi, my name is Stella. And my name is Ruby. And we're going to be opening the Wonder Box. What do why the clay in here. But I noticed that you can mold clay into any shape and any shade and color. And this is like a cube, and you can make it into different shapes like this. Make it flat, make it round, and even make it into a star. Yeah. As you can.
Thank you, Ruby and Stella, for coming to the church to open our Wonder Box this week. Stella mentioned that the clay she found is moldable and can change shapes. Today's service is going to talk about being able to adapt to change, that those who can survive and thrive among change in our world will survive. Here's a poem from the book, The Tree That Time Built, a celebration of nature, science, and imagination. It's called The Jellyfish and the Clam. Said the clam to the pink jellyfish, "You're no more than a lump of wet squish. You've no backbone or brain. You're too dull to explain. When they look at you, people go, ish." Said the jellyfish back to the clam, "I may look like thin raspberry jam, but you're just a thick shell and you don't even gel. So I'm happy to be what I am." Well, I say, let's give 3 big cheers for those two and their lengthy careers. Though they both may be dull, with no spine and no skull, still they've lasted 500 million years. And friends, it's true. Humans have been around for 150, 300,000 years. The Stegosaurus existed for about 5 million. Jellyfish and clams so far have been around for 400 million years. And that's our Wonder Box for today.
We pause and reflect now for a moment of contemplation, prayer, meditation. We give thanks for this day. We give thanks for the hands that have gone into making this service what it is. We give thanks for our visitors. We give thanks for our friends, for our members, for this congregation that offers us a place, a voice, a space to be loved and in community. Today, our hearts are heavy. We suffered 2 losses this week. Judith Bender died this week. Such a sweet lady, beautiful soul. And likewise, Fran Stetina, the local artist, he's grieving his wife, Mary, who died this week. They both lived 94 and 82 years, respectively. Long life, long lives. But even still, it's always hard to say goodbye. We grieve also for our country today. In the midst of another impeachment and the toll that it's taking on the country and on all of us as individuals, it's exhausting. We pray somehow, some way, that justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. We pray that courage will be manifested in the coming days. We pray for peace and love and goodwill toward all human beings. It's a tough time to be alive. Living is hard. I like to say death is easy, but living is hard. But living, where we experience and grow and learn to love, that's while we're here, and we must savor it, savor those beloved community moments, even amidst all the pain. Savor the progress amidst the regress. Blessings on this community. We're thankful to have our Minister Emeritus back again this morning, who will share a word with us. Blessings to him and his family. Blessings to all of you. Prayers of health and wholeness. Blessings to Reverend AZ as she finishes up her study leave. I'm so grateful for this congregation. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for the moon, the sun, and the stars. And so as I close, contemplate how lucky we are to be awake in this very alive and very conscious universe. Give thanks and do your very best to suck the marrow out of life. In the name of all that is holy and righteous. Amen.
This song On Christmas Eve, 1968, astronaut Bill Anders snapped a photo of the Earth as Apollo 8 orbited the moon. Those three guys were surprised to see from their eyes a planet looked like an Earthrise, a blue orb hovering over the moon's gray horizon with deep oceans and silver skies. It was our world's first glance at itself, a first chance to see a shared reality, a declared stance, and a commonality, a glimpse into our planet's mirror. And as threats drew nearer, our own urgency became clearer as we realized that we hold nothing dearer than this floating body we all call home. We've known that we're caught in the throes of climactic changes some say will just go away, while some simply pray to survive another day. For it is the obscure, the oppressed, the poor who, when the disaster is declared done, still suffer more than anyone. Climate change is the single greatest challenge of our time. Of this, you're certainly aware. It's saddening, but I cannot spare you from knowing an inconvenient fact, because it's getting the facts straight that gets us to act and not to wait. So I tell you this not to scare you, but to prepare you, to dare you to dream a different reality where, despite disparities, we all care to protect this world, this riddled blue marvel, this little true marvel, to master the verve and the nerve to see how we can serve our planet. You don't need to be a politician to make it your mission to conserve, to protect, to preserve that one and only home that is ours. To use your unique power to give next generations the planet they deserve. We are demonstrating, creating, advocating. We heed this inconvenient truth because we need to be anything but lenient with the future of our youth. And while this is a training in sustaining the future of our planet, there is no rehearsal. The time is now, because the reversal of harm and protection of a future so universal should be anything but controversial. So, Earth, pale blue dots, we will fail you not. Just as we chose to go to the moon, we know it's never too soon to choose hope. We choose to do more than cope with climate change. We choose to end it. We refuse to lose. We do this and more, not because it's very easy or nice, but because it is necessary. Because with every dawn, we carry the weight of the fates of this celestial body orbiting a star. And as heavy as that weight sounded, it doesn't hold us down, but it keeps us grounded, steady, ready, because an environmental movement of this size is simply another form of an Earthrise. To see it, close your eyes, visualize that all of us in this room and outside of these walls or in these halls, all of us change makers, or in a spacecraft floating like a silver raft in space, and we see the face of a planet anew. We relish the view, we witness its round green and brilliant blue, which inspires us to ask deeply, wholly, what can we do? Open your eyes, know the future of this wise planet is right in sight, right in all of us. Trust this earth uprising, all of us bring light to exciting solutions never tried before, for it is our hope that implores us at our uncompromising core to keep rising up for an earth more than worth fighting for.
There's a hymn that Unitarian Universalists have been singing for over 110 years, whose first verse is an expression of the early 20th century optimism that framed our faith at that time. It really breathed renewing life into our way of religion. The verse goes like this: "These things shall be, a loftier race than e'er the world hath known shall rise, with the flame of freedom in their souls and the light of science in their eyes." This song asserts and celebrates that with freedom as a quintessential part of every person's makeup and science lighting the way forward, the promises of beloved community will be nurtured into reality and nourished for centuries to come, if not forever. Reflecting these same hopeful expressions, Charles W. Eliot, who was Harvard University president and a Unitarian, told students at the 1909 Harvard Summer School of Theology, "Our 20th century religion will be in harmony with the great secular movements of modern society, composed of democracy, individualism, social idealism, the zeal for education, the spirit of research, the modern tendency to welcome the new, the fresh powers of preventative medicine, and the recent advances in business and industrial ethics." Wow, I'll bet you that really grabs you. Well, maybe not now, but in 1909, his words were revolutionary. His enthusiasm was contagious, inspiring many, including his son, Samuel Eliot, who worked across the Charles River in Boston, where he was president of the American Unitarian Association. Sam Eliot grew and moved Unitarianism while singing about these things that shall be, while all the time having his father's aspiring words echoing in his ears. All of this is simply to say that the relationship our faith has had with freedom, science, and beloved community is a long-standing one, though, of course, there have been quite a few misuses and detours along the way, but all of that may be for another time. Given where and who we are as a nation, as a community of faith, as individuals who are often on what feels like an ever-moving, continuous search for meaning, with occasional oasis stopovers that allow for reflection, I'm going to share with you some of the ways that I've seen and understood how science and faith and the desire and hope for beloved community have woven a very powerful and shaping web of engaging, supportive, and sometimes provocative images, stories, and faith journeys among us. Exciting, passionate, and humbling, these snapshots are meant to remind us of where we have been, and I hope inspire us to consider our incomplete future. There's a bit of tension for me in all of this because, you see, I grew up in a home where science and religion didn't really mix, and my guess is that maybe some of you also received similar kinds of messages, confusing as they might have been. Not that I had to choose one or the other, but that I had to be careful how I thought about each. It wasn't until much later into my adult life that I realized there were nuanced ways for framing the differences between science and religion. So, for example, see if this supports the way you believe. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote, "Science is about explanation. Religion is about meaning. Science analyzes, religion integrates. Science breaks things down to their component parts. Religion binds people together in relationships of trust. Science tells what is, religion tells us what ought to be. Science describes, religion beckons, summons, calls." When I found these words, I was seeking greater clarity about the ways that religion and science speak to each other, if at all. And Rabbi Sachs's commentary helped until I recalled these words by Albert Einstein, who kind of shook me up again. Einstein said, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." Let me say that again. Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind, which is to say it's not one or the other, it's both and. You don't have to choose, thank goodness. And only recently have I begun to understand that even though there's always people and forces behind us who are pushing, even threatening us to choose their way of thinking, they want us to always be sure to remember who and what they symbolize and follow the path shaped by their way of thinking, it's really always up to us in the end. In other words, how you choose to bring science and religion into your life is going to have lasting value on others, but it will also probably shape those around you. I was late in arriving at understanding why it was important for so many of my and so many of our faith ancestors to believe in the words that they sang. Often with tears in their eyes, they repeated the words, and I repeat them again. These things shall be, a loftier race than e'er the world hath known shall rise, with flame of freedom in their souls and the light of science in their eyes. These lyrics captured a way for many to move forward, a path for making meaning in life. And it was a bold, if not uncertain, break from the past where faith and science have been kept in their separate boxes, though each was vital to daily life. Only recently have I begun to see more clearly how science, religion, and beloved community, why the freedom in our souls and the light of science in our eyes, why these have been a struggle and a comfort for us in ways far larger than the verses of a hymn. It seems as though it's part of our history, a part of our nation's cultural inheritance. So, for example, at the recent January 20th presidential inauguration ceremony, some participants filled their presentations with references, direct and indirect ones, to the 1861 inaugural event, which saw Abraham Lincoln sworn in as the nation's president. Lincoln's election and his March swearing in, we shifted from March to January in 1937, was the confluence of life-altering, nation-shaping, and soul-filled events that I had never put together until several months ago. Events that all had as a backdrop the likelihood of civil war. Events that feel as current and as revealing as today's headlines in the newspaper. Let me explain. In October 1859, as the presidential candidates barnstormed the country, John Brown and his militia, after months of planning, raided the Harper's Ferry, West Virginia Armory, all as a part of a daring attempt to secure weapons for an insurrection, a revolution, by slaves and former slaves, and thereby helping to usher in the end of slavery and the creation of John Brown's vision of beloved community. He failed, was captured, and he was put to death by hanging the next month. Opinions about Brown, his co-conspirators, and their raid were very strong. They were divisive, and they were everywhere. John Brown and the Secret Six who bankrolled the militia, many of whom were Unitarian Universalists, were considered by many to be domestic terrorists, but by others they were held in high esteem. They were thought of as being saint-like patriots. Candidates were pushed to share their opinions. Their political parties that they represented were divided. The nation was deeply conflicted. Does any of this sound familiar? Let me summarize. Tensions continued to mount between slaveholders and abolitionists. In October, John Brown storms the Harper's Ferry Armory and he's captured. Some of those who raised funds for his raid flee to Canada. In November, he is hung and the nation's divisions grow deeper. And all of the time that this is going on, there's a presidential campaign that's taking place. Then, in December 1859, another explosion is heard as the first copies of Charles Darwin's book on the origin of species begin to circulate here on the East Coast. The scientific, political, and religious fallout from his book was palpable. As for science, Darwin's study was interdisciplinary in ways that no one had ever seen. Biology, geology, zoology, botany, and more. In scope, it was breathtaking. It literally was breathtaking for some, so much so that they fainted upon reading. As for politics, almost overnight, the arguments about slavery were reframed by Darwin's assertion that all living things, but of course, most notably all human beings, share a common ancestry. The way we might say this today is still jolting for many. That is, that there's only one race the human race. Slaveholders panicked with Darwin's revelations, and they ran to find those, preferably scientists like Darwin, who would challenge his conclusions and justify the legitimacy and codification of white supremacy. And as for religion, most thought that the basic assumptions on which religion was built were undermined, maybe even shredded by Darwin. You see, important for church followers was their comforting belief that not only had God created all living things just as they are, but that man, and I mean white men, were God's favorite, the highest of all living things. Darwin struck a blow to humankind's egocentrism when he knocked us off the church's image of a divinely built pedestal and placed us among all creatures, great and small. Just a side note, according to a 2019 Gallup poll, 40% of Americans agree with the statement, God created human beings pretty much in their present form at one time in the last 10,000 years or so. So you've got all of this happening when Lincoln, against the symbolic backdrop of an incomplete Capitol building, is sworn in as our new president. And if that wasn't enough, there were rumors of a widespread and intricate conspiracy by Southern sympathizers to seize the District of Columbia and install as president Kentucky Senator and former Vice President John Breckinridge. This never happened. Breckinridge fled Washington following the inauguration, and 5 weeks later, the Civil War began. Closely following all of these events was a group of Unitarian Universalists around the Concord, Massachusetts area who were fierce abolitionists, outspoken supporters of John Brown and Abraham Lincoln, and among the first in the nation to read, discuss, lecture, and review Darwin's On the Origin of Species. This group included Ralph Waldo Emerson, Margaret Fuller, Henry David Thoreau, Louisa May Alcott, and her father, Bronson. They were just a few of our faith ancestors who took bold and unpopular stands. And yet, some of them were reluctant to fully endorse Darwin's evolutionary views. For example, more than a few thought Darwin's revelations stripped mystery and magic from the natural world so much that even a simple walk in the woods was ruined. Others thought that while his decentering of humans was a healthy next step toward the beloved community, they simply couldn't resolve Darwin's broken relationship with the loving God behind their existence. And yet, in spite of these reservations, it was Unitarian Universalists who spread Darwin's good news, leveraging his ideas as reasons to abolish slavery, keep the Union together, and grow a more inclusive, welcoming religion. It's with an unsettled blend of mixed emotions that I speak about all of these things, because I find myself moving from exciting historical insights where I connect the proverbial dots, which unfortunately include many demoralizing realities about our contemporary situation. And yet, what I find amazing is the way all of these themes have found their way into the present moment. And I don't mean just this Sunday, right here and now, but into our larger communities and nation. 157 years after these events, our National Youth Poet Laureate, Amanda Gorman, wrote and spoke her poem, Earthrise, which you heard several minutes ago. And in this poem, she carries forward many of the bold and subtle themes I heard in 1859. While the poem is a clarion call to address climate change and the destruction we're not just witnessing, but that we're contributing to, I chose to share this poem because in ways I have rarely heard from anyone, she pulls together and expresses the themes of science, freedom, and justice in the beloved community. And the images accompanying her poem add visual depth and breadth to her stunning words. She wastes no time as she references that iconic and breathtaking photograph view of Earth. And she says, it was our world's first glance at itself, our first chance to see a shared reality, a declared commonality, a glimpse into our planet's mirror. Actually, it was the second time the world glanced itself. One of the first times was when Darwin returned from his voyage aboard the Beagle and began putting together the pieces of his observations. Darwin, as others had been, was frightened and humbled at the telling of his first chance to see a shared reality, a declared commonality, because there were many who were unwilling or simply did not want to hear what he had to say. The images of which Darwin and Gorman speak terrified some. I mean, the knowledge that all living things share common ground didn't then, nor does this now, fit into some people's view of what life should be. Gorman, as Darwin eventually did, persists and shares the disruption that can come from the light of science. It's saddening, she says. It's saddening, but I cannot spare you from knowing an inconvenient fact, because it's getting the facts straight that get us to act and not to wait. Then with compassion, but with clarity, she states, so I tell you this not to scare you, but to prepare you, to dare you, to dream a different reality. Her different reality, as was Darwin's sacred cause to abolish slavery, is not to simply pray to survive another day, because it is the obscure, the oppressed, the poor, who, when the disaster is declared done, still suffer more than anyone. No breaking away from the narrow, orthodox political, scientific, and religious ideologies is disquieting, and many will see the changes yet to come as a loss. They will even grieve. But they were and they are a must. Gorman and Darwin do not hold back. With freedom in their souls and the light of science in their eyes, Gorman was speaking for them both when she said, the time is now, now, now. We know it's never too soon to choose hope. It is never too soon to choose hope. 2 years after Amanda Gorman recited her Earthrise poem, she herself became an iconic image to remember as she spoke to millions as the inaugural poet. It was just a month ago when she pulled together into that moment many of the themes that created the web of which I speak. She says, somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny Black girl, descended from slaves and raised by a single mother, can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. Now, if her words were too vague or confusing, then President Biden's remarks were not. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days, Biden started. I know the forces that divided us are deep and they are real, but I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial and victory is never assured, but we must end this uncivil war. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts. Our faith, Unitarian Universalism, has a long history of webbing together the themes of freedom, science, and the kind of justice making that helps to shape the beloved community of which Amanda Gorman and President Biden speak. While our religious history is something we can take great pride in, there have been many missteps and stumbles which often don't get named. Some of these were committed by individual faith ancestors, others were committed by congregations, and even our larger assemblies of congregations. Parenthetically, I continue researching and writing about many of these people and events, and I'd welcome the opportunity to share. But for now, I'm going to leave you with some takeaways that I hope you might wish to pursue. First is simply a question to think about. How do you integrate into your life the promises of freedom, science, and justice? Think about when these were first introduced into your life, into your thinking. Perhaps they came by another name. How has your take on these changed? Next, soon after the 1859 publication of Darwin's book, many of those in the fields of politics, economics, sociology, history, theology, and psychology seized on the idea captured in the book's subtitle, The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Pundits from all walks of life and intellectual disciplines coined expressions of social Darwinism and misapplied these to every human-created struggle they could imagine, usually as ways of justifying and legitimizing the status quo and their power over others. Just in the last month alone, I've read several characterizations of struggle described with this language. The most extreme was one writer who referenced Darwinian capitalism. I suggest that when you read such misuses, that you ask yourself, who benefits from this language, and what do those benefits look like? In answering these questions, you'll likely uncover not only a misunderstanding of Darwin's assertions, but an author's prejudices and self-interests. The best two-sentence summary I've come across of Darwinian evolution was on a t-shirt at the Galapagos Islands airport. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. And how I wish Darwin had said that, but he didn't. And still, it is the most concise and accurate description of what he does say on the origin of species by means of natural selection. Or the way I like to state it is this: the only absolute is change and adaptation to change. Or using the language of religion, faith is not a certainty. Faith is the courage to live with uncertainty. Now, for you readers who would like to sink into the politics and religion, that is the culture of those who first read and reviewed Darwin in the United States, and how all of that took place, I urge you to read Randall Fuller's The Book That Changed America. I personally love this kind of presentation, the one that Fuller makes. It's a blending of science, religion, culture, politics, and of course, Unitarian Universalism. For me, it was a spellbinding read, and I hope it might be for you too. For the doers among us, I've seen that in 2 weeks, on February 28th, Reverend Anastasia will begin facilitating a look at Widening the Circle of Concern, the report of the UUA Commission on Institutional Change. I feel that for anyone who is committed to deconstructing and addressing structural and systemic racism and white supremacy culture within Unitarian Universalism and our congregation, this report is a must read. And what better way to get it done than with a group of those from our congregation? And so I urge you to contact Reverend Anastasia about this. Finally, staying in the struggle that comes when weaving a web with freedom, science, and beloved community, this weaving means staying grounded, centered, with at least 1 foot on something solid. And I'm wondering, what for you is that grounding? What is the mystery or the spirit that animates your life? Is it something that's larger than life, larger than your life? Well, you each will have to find your own answers to these questions. My experience is that it's always best when answers are arrived at with and in community. Last Sunday, Reverend John said something that I heard like, people and institutions based on predatory behavior will go extinct. Well, so much for individualism and the survival of the so-called fittest. Here's how Charles Darwin put it: selfish and contentious people will not cohere, and without coherence, nothing can be effected. Which is to say, it's better in community. Life is simply better with each other. And isn't that why we gather together as a community, as a congregation? To be in relationship with each other and our world, and to affirm and witness to each other, infants, children, youth, and adults, that our earth and all its people are one. We are an interconnected web, now and forevermore. So let this be. Amen.
We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Come back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around.
Oh, so is life. Ah, so is life. Oh, so is life. Ah, so is life. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are?
Do you know who I am? Do you know who
I am? Do I know who you are?
Do you know who I am?
One another clearly.
See one another clearly. Do you know who we are?
Oh, so is life. So is life. Whoa, so is life. So is life.
Water make the river, river wash the mountain. Fire make the sunlight turn the world around. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain. Spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around.
We are of the Spirit, truly of the Spirit. Only can the Spirit turn the world around. Whoa, so is life. So is life. Whoa, so is life. So is life. Whoa, so is life. So is life. Whoa, so is life. So is life.
Our Share the Plate partner this month is UULM, the Unitarian Universalist Legislative Ministry, which is a voice of UU liberal religious values in the legislature. Please give as generously as you can.
There are several ways to give to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Annapolis. You can use the QR code on your screen for current pledge commitments. If you're a friend and you'd like to donate today, you can use the QR code there. The Share the Plate QR code is there to support UULM. And if you would like to text to give, you text 73256 and to UUC Annapolis. Those links should be in the chat. Thank you for your generosity.
Standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the Hi sailors, this is your Admiral, Sarah Devlin Tremble, here to tell you all about Camp Beagle. Here at Camp Beagle, we are all about charting a course to explore, to learn about Charles Darwin, who sailed as a naturalist exploring on the world upon the good ship HMS Beagle. Here at Camp Beagle, we have 5 ships that will sail the waters of exploration and a lighthouse that will lead the way. This year's Camp Beagle will set sail on July 12th through 16th. And as the pandemic has brought us many challenges, we will adapt our journey. We are offering 2 options this year, a hybrid and virtual. Hybrid will meet in person from 9 to 12 p.m. on Monday through Friday. And during that time, the ships will sail from Port Evolution to Port Adventure. Virtual campers will have the option to come up with their own family to explore on their own in the afternoon or the evenings. All campers will have access to 5 virtual lessons from Port Science and Port Wonder, as well as traveler's kits. New this year, we are offering an exploratorium as part of the camp. Campers will join a Zoom club each day at 4 p.m. of their own interest choice. Registration opens today. You'll see a link soon in your email. The heart of Camp Beagle is the connections we build and share. And although it will be a different journey this year, we hope to build connections with you and foster them with our young sailors. This camp is volunteer run, so like every year, we need help. The virtual aspect of the camp might mean that you're able to help when you weren't able to before. We need virtual harbor masters to record lessons, and we need facilitators of exploratorium, as well as in-person help. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Life's most persistent question is, what are you doing for others?" At Camp Beagle, we say, we are sailors on the HMS Beagle. We come with an open mind, ready to learn, a caring heart that respects all living things, and helping hands that can change the world.
As our light goes out in this chalice, let us take it out with us in our hearts to the world. May it guide us to live boldly, compassionately, and with integrity. Please unmute yourself.